All right. We shall get going. Welcome, everybody. Now, I am going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to introduce our National Course Advisor, Nick Hart, who is going to be taking part of this presentation. So my name is John Rees. I am Professor and Discipline Lead of Psychology on the Melbourne campus of ACAP. And I'm going to be telling you tonight about some of the specific details to do with studying psychology here at ACAP. This session is being recorded. What I would suggest is if you do have questions, please do use the chat facility. The chat facility in Zoom is available for you to use. You can answer any questions, and there are course advisors who will be answering those questions for you throughout the presentation, and then there'll also be an opportunity for me to answer some questions for you at the end of the presentation as well. So there's plenty of opportunity for you to ask any questions. You'll notice that, of course, with big sessions like this, it's been set up so that you are muted and you cannot unmute yourself, otherwise it becomes very chaotic and very difficult to run. So please do use that chat facility if you want to ask questions, and that'll be monitored quite closely throughout the session tonight. So I'm going to introduce Nick, our course advisor, who's going to take the lead on the presentation. Over to you, Nick.
Thanks very much, John, and hello everybody. Welcome to tonight's Discover ACAP Psychology session. Just another reminder, as John said, that tonight's session is recorded for all those in attendance. So my name is Nick Hart. I'm one of ACAP's National Course Advisors. In tonight's session, myself and John Rees, ACAP Melbourne's Discipline Lead, Undergraduate and Honours Program Coordinator, are going to kind of walk you through everything that you'll need to know about studying in our college in general and psychology to be more particular. I'll firstly give you some information. John, if you're right to change the slide there. I'll be giving you some information about what makes ACAP different, as well as the services and support that we provide. John will then introduce himself and run through some course-specific information, but at any stage, as he said, if you do have questions throughout, my colleagues Shelley and Brendan will be in the chat function to respond as soon as possible. So let's take a moment in commencing tonight's session by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognising their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. John, if you could please change the slide there. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and we recognise those whose ongoing effort to protect and promote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures will leave a lasting legacy for future elders and leaders. And one more slide, beautiful. So, who are we? ACAP is the Australian College of Applied Psychology, and we've been delivering specialist courses in the helping professions for over 38 years now, since 1983. We're a national provider of these programs, delivering on-campus studies in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, and very recently Byron Bay. We can also cater to those living rurally or internationally through our online or blended delivery model. The online delivery can be selected for our psychology discipline should you wish to complete your studies in the comfort of your own home. However, ACAP doesn't just provide psychology programs. You may also be familiar with our other disciplines, such as social work, counselling, criminology, and now coaching as well there. So with each discipline there, they do have their own delivery methods, as we suggested, that you can choose from. So we ask that you be sure to have a look at the attendance requirements before enrolling, or again, our national course advisors are in the chat function there if you'd like to ask them. And since ACAP has been founded, we have successfully graduated over 13,000 students nationwide, having them industry ready upon the completion of their qualifications. Now we've covered who we are, it's time to look at who you are and why you may wish to study psychology with ACAP. ACAP's personalised learning experience is one of the first reasons students choose to study with our college. With weekly classes that can be completed both in and outside of business hours, our students are able to select what times work for them, and we'll cover the rest. Class allocations are done on a first in, first served basis, meaning the sooner that you enrol, the quicker we can allocate the best times for you. Now, during COVID-19, we have been flooded with positive responses regarding our classroom experience, whether that be in person or online. And with our smaller class sizes, students also have the opportunity to study on campus, where restrictions and regulations regarding your safety and social distancing can be easily assured. You'll also have the reassurance that no questions will go unanswered, and you'll be given the time and attention that our students deserve. Having educators that are working in the industry as well as teaching, whether they're running their own practice, leading a team of health professionals, or engaging in academic research, their knowledge and experience is second to none and won't leave you guessing whether ACAP was the right decision. The network connections, reputation, and legitimacy that our college has in the sector also means that we can have you ready to step into a professional career upon the successful completion of our undergraduate and postgraduate awards. Our accrediting bodies, such as the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council, Australian Association of Social Workers, Australian Counselling Association, Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia, Career Industry Counselling Association, and the International Coaching Federation, means that you can have the assurance that upon completing our qualifications, you will be recognised Australia-wide for your discipline, studies and experience. Future ACAP students don't need to worry if they aren't ready to commence their studies at the beginning of the academic calendar either. You can select from one of 3 intakes each year at the beginning of February, end of May or start of June, and the middle of September. If you've taken a look at our fees and payments page as well, you will have seen that ACAP also has access to Commonwealth Assistance, or better known as fee help. This program is available to Australian citizens, New Zealand Special Category visa holders, or humanitarian visa holders, and the purpose of this program is to defer the cost of your studies till you have the financial capability to afford small repayments as little as $10 to $20 each week. And better yet, those repayments are deducted prior to tax, so it's hardly noticeable. Now, ACAP doesn't just support you in your class time either. We have a plethora of various networks and support services readily available to ensure that you get the most out of your studies and excel with your personal and professional growth. We offer services such as our student learning support team, who run regular webinars and workshops and have how-to guides, video tutorials, and even their own website where all of this useful information can be found, giving you more independence throughout your journey. They're even happy to sit with you one-on-one to go through study plans and all the important things for your assessments, such as academic writing, referencing, and presenting. ACAP have recently brought in our new Ally initiative as part of the Pride and Diversity Network. We support students from all walks of life and promote equity, sustainability, and advocacy for every community. You can find some details just on the next slide there, please, John. We hold regular catch-ups for those who are interested to get involved, meet like-minded individuals, and develop lasting connections. And we've seen that extracurricular activities and programs like this don't just help boost student morale, but also help you to flourish in your studies with peer-to-peer support. As I briefly touched on earlier, ACAP does have a flexible approach to our teaching and learning through applied skills that won't just teach you how to thrive in our sector, but how to put those teachings into practice. And just one more slide there, please, John. Perfect. We do this through a trimester model for our studies, running each of our 3 intakes every year. With full or part-time options available for your studies, you can take things nice and slow, or you can even accelerate them in some circumstances. This can be done through one of 4 options: on campus, online, blended, or a combination of these deliveries, both in and outside of business hours. Please do speak to one of your course advisors when enrolling to get a thorough understanding of how each of these delivery methods work and how it may look for you. So, now that you know all about ACAP in general, let's take a look at why we're all here to study psychology. I'll hand over to Professor John Rees, Melbourne Discipline Lead, Undergraduate and Honours Program Coordinator in Psychological Sciences.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for giving that general background on ACAP and so on. Yeah, as Nick said, I'm a psychology academic. I'm not an administrator. I'm not a course advisor like Nick and other expert people here to help you, but I am an academic. I've always been a psychology academic. I've been a psychology academic basically all my working life. I've worked at 3 universities before I came to ACAP in 2014, and I'm the senior psychology academic on the Melbourne campus, and I also am the coordinator of the undergraduate and honours programs. So I know quite a bit about ACAP programs. So why do I do this? I was asked to provide this information, and it caused me to sit and reflect about why I do what I do, why I love doing what I do, which is teaching psychology, because I've been doing it now for 35 years. And like I said there, the basic reason, when I try to distill it down into a single couple of sentences, can be captured by that quote there, which is something that I wrote. So there's nothing more, to me, there's nothing more mysterious, fascinating, and challenging to understand than behaviour in the human mind. It's a never-ending feast of knowledge. To have the opportunity to inspire students learning about the wonders of human psychology is a privilege that I value and respect every time I teach. And one of the reasons why I did come and work at ACAP was because of the emphasis on student learning, the emphasis on teaching, and the very student-focused and student-centric approach that ACAP takes towards its studies. It is a completely student-driven institution. And I think that's something that I value as an academic. I love to teach. I love to be in a classroom. I love to, whether that classroom's live or on Zoom or whatever, I love working with students. And really ACAP allows me to fulfill that dream and to do something that I really love to do. So what is psychology? What is this marvelous discipline that we're interested in? We can define psychology as the scientific study of the human mind and behaviour. And you've got to understand that psychology is a science. And undergraduate psychology courses are not courses that teach you in the skills and the competencies of being a professional practitioner in psychology. That comes much later. So the way that psychology education is structured, it's a little bit strange. You don't learn those skills, even though you might want to be a psychologist, you don't learn those skills in the early part of your training at the bachelor's level or even at the honours level. It comes later. It comes post fourth year. The material that you cover in the undergraduate program, yes, you do talk about applied topics, but it is really emphasising the scientific study of human behaviour and mental processes, not the application of that study. That comes later. Now, that doesn't mean that a psychology degree doesn't set you up for all sorts of fantastic areas to study and investigate and of great areas to work. It does. But the competencies and the attributes that you pick up in an undergraduate psychology degree are very much geared around understanding the scientific nature of human behaviour and mental activity. Okay, so that's just a little bit of general background about what psychology is and how psychology runs as an area of study at higher education levels. So why are people so attracted and interested in studying psychology? Psychology is the most popular undergraduate area of study in Australia. Right now, there are more higher education students studying psychology than any other individual subject. And that doesn't mean that they're all aiming to be psychologists. They're not. They might be doing just 1 year of psychology out of interest or as a service subject or something like that. It's also tremendously interesting to high school students. So every state bar New South Wales now has Year 12 psychology as a secondary school option, and it's enormously popular in all of those institutions. I used to be in charge of Year 12 psychology in Victoria for a couple of years. I was known as the chief examiner, wonderful title. I was the chief examiner. I set the exam. So I know a bit about that area as well, and it was incredibly popular. Psychology was the third most popular subject for Year 12 students. So what is it about it? Well, it's just inherently interesting. If you look at some of the things that we investigate, here's a few classic studies in psychology that we can sort of get our head around, some of the sort of critical questions. Milgram's famous obedience to authority study. Why are people obedient to authority to the extent that they will electrocute other people? Milgram demonstrated that ordinary people would obey authority to the point that they would deliver what they felt were lethal electric shocks to total strangers simply because somebody in a white coat was telling them to do so. Now, they weren't actually administering electric shocks. It was all a setup. But what Milgram demonstrated was just how powerful obedience to authority could be. If you look at the second picture there of the car accident, that's taken from some very famous experiments by a woman by the name of Elizabeth Loftus, who did a whole series of studies on how easy it was to manipulate human memory and to implant false memories. And what Loftus wanted to demonstrate there was that eyewitness testimony, which we rate and consider so highly in courtroom settings, can be incredibly easily manipulated. And that's caused major changes in how we look at eyewitness testimony. The third study there, the third picture you see there, the very famous Zimbardo prison experiment, where Philip Zimbardo, a prominent psychologist at Stanford University, took first-year university students and allocated them roles in a mock prison scenario as guards or prisoners, and put them into this situation and gave them instructions on how to act and behave, and incredible things happened. In fact, it was made into a very interesting Netflix movie, which you can watch and look at. It's quite a good film. And a study that was meant to run for 2 weeks had to be stopped after 5 days because the students were just adapting and getting into the roles, taking on the roles a bit too seriously. And that really told us a lot about what happens when people are given a particular role, a uniform, a setting, set of instructions, a position within society, how people's behaviour can change. And in addition to learning about that, we learned a lot about research ethics. And we discussed that study both as a social psychological study and also as an example of a controversial study in research ethics. And if there's one area of psychology that's really expanded enormously over the last 25 years, it's our understanding of the relationship between brain and behaviour. And what you can see there is a CAT scan showing a person who's got 90% of their cerebral cortex missing, yet that person was functioning perfectly well. What happens when you have 90% of your brain missing? Well, it may kill you, but there are circumstances where people have substantial parts of their brain missing and are still actually functioning quite effectively psychologically and socially. So we learn about the relationship between brain and behaviour. So there's 4 really seminal bits of research in psychology that give you an idea about just how diverse and how fascinating and how relevant and topical this area called psychology is. Yes, it is the scientific study of human behaviour and mental states, but within that, there is enormous diversity and there is so many different topics and areas that are of interest. Not just interest from a theoretical scientific point of view, but interest from a real world topical point of view. Now, psychology is everywhere. You, every single one of you, is a psychological being. You are a psychological entity. You behave and you have mental activity. And I think studying psychology, apart from learning about these things in general, is an opportunity for us to learn a lot about ourselves as well. So it's just got that real interesting allure. And psychology is a helping profession. We know that depression and anxiety are enormously serious and disabling conditions. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide, with more than 300 million people experiencing depression. Anxiety, 250 million people. Psychology is involved in not just learning about these conditions and understanding them better, but also in treating these conditions, in helping people with these conditions. A lot of training that you will do in the professional arms of psychology, in general practice or in one of the specialised areas, will almost always involve you working with people who experience depression and or anxiety, and learning the skills to be able to assist those people in their lives in dealing with their conditions. This is sort of like the slide from hell. This is a sort of slide you don't like to show at these presentations, but you sort of have to. It gives you a bit of a running summary about how to become a psychologist. Now, psychology in this country is a protected title. It's a registered profession. So nobody can just go out and call themselves a psychologist. To call yourself a psychologist, to practice psychology, you must be registered. You must be registered with a group known as the Psychology Board of Australia, which is an arm of AHPRA, which is the General Health Practitioners Registration Agency. And the Psychology Board of Australia, the Psychology Registration Board, is part of AHPRA. So to be a psychologist, you must be registered. Okay, that is a legal requirement. Now, the pathway to registration, if you think of it in terms of full-time study from scratch, it is a 6-year pathway to become a psychologist. Now, that 6 years is broken up in a number of different ways, but basically it begins by doing an undergraduate degree, either a bachelor's degree or a grad dip. Once you've finished that, you need to do a 4th year of some sort, an honours year or a postgraduate diploma of some sort. Now, once you do that 4 years, you then got 2 more years of training. Now, you used to be able to do 2 years of on-the-job training, but that pathway is closing, and it will be closed in the middle of next year. So it's not going to be relevant for anybody here. But the 2 other pathways are to do one of 2 things. Either you do a 1-year master's in general psychological practice, and you follow that up with a 1-year internship or supervised practice, or you do a 2-year master's in a specialised area of psychology, such as clinical psychology or educational developmental psychology or organisational psychology, or one of those other specialised areas, okay? And that gives you your 6 years, which is the minimum full-time period that you need to study from scratch to become a registered psychologist. Now, there are some variations on that. For example, if you come into a graduate diploma pathway rather than a bachelor's pathway, that will be a little bit shorter. But if we take the classic, traditional, start from scratch model of a bachelor's degree, followed by a 4th year, followed by 2 years after that, you're looking at a 6-year full-time pathway. Obviously, that's prorated if you do things part-time. Now, don't worry if you don't get all the sort of nuances and all the technicalities and the specifics around this. You learn about this as you're going through the course. You'll get lots of information about that pathway. As I said there, what they used to call the 4+2 pathway, where after your 4th year of study, you did 2 years of supervised work experience, that pathway is closing. So on 30th of June 2022, 30th of June next year, nobody can enter that pathway anymore. There is a long, for want of a better term, teach-out period for that pathway where people can investigate that and continue on that and finish that. That goes all the way through to 2029. But in terms of entering that pathway, that's it. After 30th of June 2022, there is no more entry into that particular pathway. So for you people who are starting off your study, that won't be relevant. Your options will be either a 5th year, 1-year master's plus 1-year internship, or a 2-year master's in a specialised area of study. Okay. All right. So why would you consider studying psychology at ACAP? Well, we run the whole gamut of training from bachelor's through to master's level. We can get you all the way through to registration. We provide that pathway. All of our programs are fully accredited with the accrediting bodies, with TEXA, with the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council. So basically all of our programs are absolutely 100% rock solid, equivalent to any program that you would do at any university in Australia. Okay, we've got that flexibility of being able to study through online. Okay, there's a big commitment for online students at ACAP. A lot of effort's gone in to give people a great online experience. We have a very diverse student body. So we love school leavers, we've got vet students, we've got a lot of people who are what we call return to study people. People who may have never studied at higher education before, but they're at a time in their life when they decide this is something I want to do. Or you may have studied previously and you decide, I want to see change. You know, I may have done a degree in nursing or engineering or history or whatever, and you decide, okay, well, psychology really interests me. I want to do a sort of a study and career sea change and study psychology again. So we get a lot of students who are what we call return to study students, which means that our student profile is very diverse. You know, we've got 18 and 19-year-old school leavers, all the way through to people in their 50s and 60s who decide to come back and study for the first time in their lives or return to study. So it's a really diverse group. Now, we understand that, and we're very familiar with that, and we can adapt to that. And we know who our students are, and we know what our students need, and we know what our students want. And so we're able to teach accordingly and provide the levels of support that people need. So I suppose one of the differences between a university and ACAP is that in a university, you get lots of young people, lots of school leavers. Now, we've got school leavers here, but we've also got that very high number of return to study people. So it's a very diverse student body, which makes it really interesting for students and makes it really interesting for us as teachers. Okay, so what are the sorts of skills that we want you to pick up as an undergraduate student? And they're sort of listed down there. Now, take a look at those things. They're what we call the competencies or the graduate attributes. When you look at those things, okay, the first one mentions psychology, but look at the others. They're very general. Planning and implementing and evaluating research, thinking critically, communicating effectively, acting professionally. Look at those. They don't even mention the word psychology. Those attributes, those skills, they are incredibly useful for a whole range of areas, not just psychology. One of the things that I really strongly emphasize when I'm giving these talks is the idea that you shouldn't see an undergraduate psychology degree as something you do only if you want to become a psychologist. And one of the stats that I always mention is the stat that 50% of students who do a law degree will never work as a lawyer. And yet there is no shortage of people wanting to do law degrees. Why is that? Because they see a law degree as a terrific general degree that can point people in all sorts of different and interesting and rewarding directions. The psychology degree is the same. Yes, it is the first step on becoming a psychologist, but if you don't go down that pathway for whatever reason, a psychology degree gives you some terrific attributes, competencies, and skills that you can use in an incredibly diverse range of future work and future study options. It is a great generalist degree. All right, now before we go on, I'm going to give you a little test. I'm going to run a little poll. And what I want you to do is take a look at this little question that you can see here, which says, and this is what we do in lectures. So what we do in lectures is every now and then we'll stop the lecture and we'll do a wake up. And this wake up is to see how you're thinking and get you to answer a question. So here's the question. How many years of full-time study does it normally take for someone to become a registered psychologist in Australia? So I'm going to launch the poll now, and I want you to answer that question. Whoa, people are flying their answers in. Brilliant. Now, I noticed that a couple of people have raised their hand on the Zoom. Look, unfortunately, we can't stop the presentation to respond to any hand raises. Sorry about that. If you do have questions, the best thing for you to do is to just use the chat forum, okay? All right, so we will end the poll now, and you're all obviously paying attention and doing a great job because 92% of people got it right. The correct answer is 6 years to become from a full-time study to become a registered psychologist in Australia. Nicely done, nicely done. Okay, back to the presentation. So what are the courses that we can do here at ACAP? So let's separate out the undergraduate from the postgraduate. At the undergraduate level, there are 3 introductory courses, 3 bachelor's courses. There's the Bachelor of Psychological Science, and you can start that at any point in the year, any one of the 3 terms in the year. You don't have to wait till the start of the year. And we've got 2 what we call double majors. We've got the Bachelor of Psychological Science and Criminology, and a Bachelor of Psychological Science and Counselling. Then in terms of 4th year, we've got the honours year, the Bachelor of Psychological Science honours. Now, the 3 undergraduate bachelor's degrees, it's very important for you to understand that the psychology in all of those is absolutely identical, right? Where they vary is in what you do outside of the psychology units. So when I'm giving, for example, a lecture, or I'm taking a course in first-year research methods, which is something I teach, I'm going to have students who are enrolled in all of those degrees, and they're all doing exactly the same unit, exactly the same psychology studies. Where they differ is in what you do on top of the psychology studies. Then when you finish that, if you want to do a 4th year, we have an honours year. At the postgraduate level, there are 2 degrees that I want to really focus on. They're the first 2. The Graduate Certificate of Psychological Science, the Graduate Diploma of Psychological Science. Now, these are degrees for people who already have a bachelor's degree in anything, right? From anywhere, okay? So as long as you've got a bachelor's level degree or equivalent thereof in any discipline, you may think about doing one of these graduate courses, either the graduate certificate or the graduate diploma. And I'll explain the difference between the 2 in a minute and what the different sort of entry standards and entry pathways are for those 2. Those 2 degrees there, they are alternatives to doing an undergraduate bachelor's. They are not alternatives to a 4th year. That graduate certificate and the graduate diploma are alternative undergraduate bachelor's pathways. Okay, so please be very clear on that. The other courses listed there are the post-4th year courses, the postgraduate courses. And I'm not going to talk about those tonight because our focus here tonight is on this sort of undergraduate sort of entry levels type of things. You'll learn more about these as you go through. All right. So before we get into the specifics of each course, what can you do with a psychology degree? Well, as I mentioned, My feeling is that a psychology degree is a fantastic generalist degree, and it sets you up for so many terrifically rewarding options in other areas of study or in other areas of work. We get a lot of students who, for example, don't go on to do any further study in psychology, but they go on in areas such as social work, counselling, human resources, teaching, gerontology, rehabilitation, criminology, and so on. Lots of different areas really value speech pathology, really value what a psychology student brings. Now, in terms of the sectors, there's a list of them down there. You've got areas such as health and social welfare, social policy and research, human services, disability, mental health services, ageing, juvenile justice. These are all areas of employment and all areas of further study that really value what psychology students can bring to the table. All right, so let's talk about the undergraduate courses. So you've got some entry requirements down there. There is either an online or phone-based screening interview. And then there's a number of different requirements. You either have to have a Year 12 type of certificate, or be 21 years or over, or have completed a VET certificate for, or have admission to any undergraduate degree in an Australian university. So there's a lot of different pathways by which you can get into one of these ACAP undergraduate psychology courses. And the courses are a mixture of lectures and tutorials. They're very flexible. There's online and on-campus shoots and on-campus classes. That's when we can have on-campus classes, of course. There's not many going on at the moment. They are predetermined. So some of the classes are flexible and asynchronous. For example, many of the lectures are flexible and asynchronous, but the tutorial classes, for example, are at a set time, and you are expected to attend at that set time. They are recorded, but they do have an attendance requirement. So you do need to attend it, whether it be online or whether it be on campus. I won't go into all the sort of details of that now, because you'll learn more about that as you go forward, and you're very welcome to ask me any questions about that as we go on. The only psychology units that actually have face-to-face real-time lectures are the first year ones. And even then, you don't have to attend. You can watch a recording if you like. They're all recorded. From second and third year, the lectures are all pre-recorded. They're all what we call asynchronous. There's no live face-to-face lectures. And there's good reasons for that, to give us flexibility, give you flexibility. But the tutorial classes are all real-time, face-to-face or online, and that's when the attendance is expected and required. And I won't go into the sort of nitty-gritty details of that. Each unit, each subject will usually have the equivalent of, say, a 2-hour lecture and a single 1.5-hour or 90-minute tutorial class. Okay, let's talk about the specific degrees that we've got here. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Bachelor of Psychological Science. Now that's made up of 24 units, so 24 subjects. At ACAP, a subject is called a unit. So 24 units. Now, in that degree, you will do 10 core psychology units, okay? At first year, second year, and third year. You'll do 2 psychology units at first year, 4 psychology units at second year, 4 psychology units at third year. You'll also do 3 what we call multidisciplinary units. These are the MALT units, and they're taken by every student at ACAP, every bachelor student at ACAP in counselling, social work, in criminology and psychology. They must do these multidisciplinary units. You'll also do 11 what we call electives. These are the units you do outside of the MALTs and the Psych core. And the electives are available in areas such as counselling and criminology and social welfare. And we in psychology also have our own psychology electives. And you can mix and match between those. Okay, there's no set structure there. You've got a lot of flexibility as to which electives you might choose to do. Now, there's a very diverse range of assessments. There's written assessments, there's presentations, there's reflective assignments, there's data analysis exercises, there's exams, there's research proposals, there's blog posts. There's a very diverse range of assessments. And I think one of the themes that's running through the assessments is there's been a move now towards more competency-based assessments rather than pure knowledge-based assessments. We really want students to be able to graduate with a range of what we call competencies rather than just being able to parrot facts and knowledge. We want people to be able to apply and use that. So there's now a stronger emphasis on what we call competency-based assessments. The second bachelor's degree is the double major with criminology. Now, this degree does not have electives. It's got a set structure. You do the same 10 psychology core units, you do the same 3 malt units, but you also do 11 selected criminology units. Okay, so there's no flexibility in this degree. It is a set degree structure of 24 units in psychology and criminology. And that's a very popular degree because people have got a lot of interest in criminology, and it covers all sorts of theories and models that we get in psychology and in criminology as well. So you look at approaches to criminal behaviour, causes of crime and crime prevention, and you look at the nexus between psychology and criminology, where the two things intersect. Okay, so as it says down there, the coverage of sociology in this major stream examines the wider context in which criminal behaviour takes place and the role that society plays. And you can see how that matches really nicely with so many areas of psychology. Now, another incredibly popular unit is the Bachelor of Psychological Science and Counselling. So, in fact, those numbers need to be updated. So it's the 10 psychology units there, not 13. So it's 10 core psychology units, the 3 multidisciplinary units, and 11 counselling units. So you do 11 counselling units, 10, sorry, the numbers are slightly incorrect there, needs to be updated, 10 psychology units, 3 multidisciplinary units, and 11 counselling units. Okay. Now, then again, there are no electives here. It's a set structure. Everybody has to do the same thing. But this actually gives you professional skills training as a counsellor, day 1, week 1, class 1. This is very popular because a lot of people, what they don't like about a psychology undergraduate degree is that it doesn't give them the skills and competencies that they feel they need right from the first bounce. This degree does, because you get it in the counselling side of things. In fact, when you finish this degree, you are, in fact, a qualified counsellor. You are eligible for membership of at least one of the professional counselling bodies. So this allows you, if you finish this degree and you decide to go no further in the psychology part of it, you've in fact completed your counselling qualification to be a qualified counsellor, and you can call yourself that and get a job in that profession as well, should you choose to do so. It's still the first step on the pathway to becoming a psychologist, but it does allow you to be a qualified counsellor. So that's a really popular degree. You know, we're finding now that more and more students are wanting to do our double majors, our counselling and criminology double majors, and less the general Bachelor of Psychological Science, because they're seeing the double majors as something that matches their interest better, and is what they're seeing is they're good pathways towards a job or even further study. And in counselling, you can go on to further study as well. There's a Masters of Counselling and Psychotherapy that you can do at ACAP. And there are other postgraduate counselling courses available at other institutions as well. Now, this is the only degree at the bachelor's level that has placement. And the placement is part of the counselling side of things. So there is placement in this. There is no placement in any of the other bachelor's degrees, okay? This is the only psychology degree that has placement. There are no placements in any of the other undergraduate psychology degrees. Okay, so if you finish that third year, if you finish one of those bachelor's programs, you can transition into the 4th year program, the honours program. It is competitive. You realistically need to have a distinction average in your core undergraduate psychology units to get into the honours program. So it is competitive. It does have a pretty high standard, but you know, every year students get in there and we have good honours cohorts every year. The honours program you can enter at any time. You can enter at trimester 1, trimester 2, or trimester 3. And it's basically consists of a major research project that you do with supervision from an individual academic, plus some, and that's half of it, and half of it is applied coursework. And we do give ACAP students preference for entry, but we will allow students from other institutions to do the honours program as well. And by the way, once you finish your bachelor's degree, you're eligible to apply for any 4th year program in the country. Okay, so you're not limited to studying at ACAP. You can go and do your 4th year at any 4th year program in the country. Now, let me talk a little bit about the graduate diploma and the graduate certificate. Now, let's imagine that you actually already have a bachelor's degree, okay? And you might have done years ago a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Engineering or a Bachelor of Nursing or whatever, okay? And you decide that you want to come and study psychology with a goal to entering the pathway to becoming a psychologist. Well, here's an alternative pathway for you. What you can do is you can initially enroll in the Graduate Certificate of Psychological Science. Now, let's imagine that the previous bachelor's degree that you did has no psychology in it, okay? No psychology at all. Or let's imagine that your previous studies did have some psychology, but it was a long time ago. It was over 10 years ago, okay? Now, if you fall into one of those buckets, you need to start by doing the Graduate Certificate of Psychological Science. And that consists of the 2 first-year psychology units, a MALT unit, and the second-year research methods psychology unit. So you need to finish this first. Now, you might do the graduate certificate and finish it and think to yourself, you know what? That's enough. I actually don't want to go any further. Okay, that's fine. You've got a graduate certificate. You've got a degree. You've got the introductory psychology content, the MALT content, and second-year research methods in psychology content. That's fine, at least you've got something out of it. But most people use this as a pathway to the next step, which is the graduate diploma. So if you have a bachelor's degree that has no psychology in it, or if you have a bachelor's degree that had some psychology in it, but it was quite a long time ago, more than 10 years ago, this is your starting point. You start off by doing the Graduate Certificate of Psychological Science, which is made up of 4 units. And you can do it in 2 trimesters full time, okay? So 2 trimesters, or you can spread it out over a period of time that suits you better, okay? Now, if you pass that, you can then enroll in the Graduate Diploma. Now, who enrolls in the Graduate Diploma? 2 classes of people. 1, people who have just completed the graduate certificate, okay? They then transition in the graduate diploma. Or, this is the big or, if you do have a previous bachelor's degree and that bachelor's degree had some psychology in it and you passed it and it was APAC accredited and you did it within the last 10 years, okay, there's a lot of conditions there, then you don't have to do the graduate certificate. You can jump straight into the graduate diploma. But you've got to have done a bachelor's degree with some psychology and passed it, and that psychology had to be APAC accredited, and you had to have completed at least all the first-year units of psychology, and you had to have done that in the last 10 years. So if you tick those boxes, you don't need to do the graduate certificate, you can jump straight in the graduate diploma. The graduate diploma is made up of the 2nd and 3rd year core psychology units. Now, they are slightly different. They are slightly advanced because you are doing a graduate diploma. You're not doing a bachelor's degree. The lectures are the same, but what you do differently is you will do different assessments, okay? The assessments will be 1 level up from what the bachelor students do. The reading is the same, the lectures are the same, a lot of the tube content is the same, but you will be doing slightly different assessments because you are a graduate diploma student, you're at a different level versus, you've already got a bachelor's degree versus a bachelor's student. But, you know, they're the same sort of unit. So for example, one subject in the bachelor's degree is called cognitive psychology. And in the graduate diploma, it's called cognitive psychology advanced. Okay, that's literally the only difference. So this is a pathway for people who have already got a degree, and it's quicker because it means you don't need to do the electives. You do the same core, but you don't need to do the electives. So this is a very attractive option for people who already have a degree to either go grad cert followed by grad dip, or if they meet the requirements, jump straight into grad dip. Okay, so they're our pathways. So I emphasize again, this graduate diploma is not an alternative to honours. It is not a 4th year. It is an alternative undergraduate pathway that takes you to honours. Once you finish this, you've still got to do your 4th year. You've still got to do the honours. Okay, here's the honours degree, which I've already spoken a little bit about. It can be done fully online, or there are on-campus options as well. So it can be done fully online, it can be done full-time or part-time, and you can enter either at term 1, term 2, or term 3. Okay, so it can be done on campus or online. There's full flexibility there, and it's half research and half coursework. You work on a very serious, very intense and comprehensive individual research project with an individual academic supervisor. Okay, so online or on campus, entry points at term 1, term 2, or term 3, half research, half coursework, can be done full or part-time, lots of flexibility there, based around a very real research project done in concert with an individual academic supervisor. All right, so look, that finishes the formal part of the presentation. I noticed there's been a lot of chat there, so I'm now going to hand it back to Nick, who has been monitoring the chat and the questions and answering questions, and he may have some questions that he thinks that I would be better to answer for you. So I'll hand you over to Nick.
Thanks very much there, John. And I do apologise to all the participants. Unfortunately, my audio was playing up at the start, apparently, but I wasn't in the chat function. I do apologise for that. If I could just get a nod that my audio is okay now.
It's still
not okay.
Still a bit of background going on there, Nick. I'm not quite sure what's happening there.
It might be better just for, if it's okay, John, are you happy just to stay on and answer questions live, and I'll be in the chat function?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So what I'll do now is I will go right back to the start of the chat, and I will just whip through quickly through the chat, and I'll just see whether there's any questions there that I would be the better person to answer. So we've got a lot, so people are complaining about Nick's background noise. So sorry about that. I have my background noise. There's no background noise. The only background noise you get from me is my barking dogs. Okay. Good question. So recognition of counselling units. Yes, if you do move from a counselling degree at ACAP into a psychology degree, there is a mechanism by which you can apply to have some of your counselling units accredited as part of that. Yep. Courses are internationally recognised, although international recognition of psychology studies is at the behest of the overseas organisation. It's not governed by us. So you would need to check with the overseas bodies about the international recognition, and that will vary from country to country. So just flipping through here. Okay, so someone's asked about a career in crime. Okay, did you mean maybe a career in criminology as opposed to a career in crime? I'm not quite sure. Anyway, let's assume it was a career in criminology. Yeah, a psychology course is very, very useful in that, particularly the double major in psychology and criminology. Yes, career in crime. Okay, whatever. Just going through here. So just bear with me while I flip through. No, so there's no coverage of psychodynamic psychotherapy in a psychology degree, certainly not in the undergraduate. And most professional psychology program does not take a psychodynamic approach. Most of it takes more an evidence-based cognitive behavioral type approach. If you wanted to study psychodynamic psychotherapy, there are specialist courses in that area, and there may be coverage of that in the Masters of Counselling and Psychotherapy. I say that very hesitantly because I'm not in that discipline, so you would need to check and do some research about that. I think I've spoken a bit about the honours year. Yeah, so are the honours programs capped? Yes, they are. So there is a capped number of students who can get entry into honours every year, and that cap is dictated by supervision capacity. So the number of places we've got to provide good supervision, that's going to depend on the number of staff, the number of places that those staff have, and another number of other factors. So there is always a quota cap on the number of honours students that we can take in any one year. Yes, undergraduate is theory, very theory science based. So the pathway that's closing soon is what we call the 4+2 pathway, which is where once you'd finished your 4th year, rather than doing further study at an institution, you actually got training on the job as a sort of a supervised placement or internship. It was called the 4+2, and you could do it privately, you could do it in an organisation, but it didn't involve any further study at a university or higher ed provider. It was 2 years of supervised work experience. That's the pathway that's closing. So a couple of people have got questions about the master's programs. Now, that's not an area that I have expertise in, but I can tell you, yes, all postgraduate courses are competitive in the same way that entry into 4th year is competitive. So there are various pathways that you can explore. We don't really have time to go into those professional pathways today, but if you do want to perhaps email me or communicate with me outside this, I'm very happy to speak with you about that. Okay, so somebody's asked a question about an alternative to honours. So there are a lot of 4th year courses in the country that you're eligible to apply for. Many of them are called honours. Some of them are called grad dip. Now, this is where things get confusing. There are some grad dips that are alternatives to a bachelor's pathway. There are some grad dips that are an alternative to honours. You've got to be very careful that you know which one is which. It doesn't really matter. As long as they're accredited 4th year programs, they are alternatives, and they will have different entry standards. And as an ACAP undergraduate graduate, okay, as a graduate, you are eligible to apply for any of those programs. And yes, an undergraduate psych degree would definitely benefit people in marketing. Okay, so someone's asked a good question about credit. So there is always a bit of a timeline on credit. And what happens there is there's generally a 10-year statute of limitations. So basically, when you apply for credit, if you did your studies more than 10 years ago, you're highly unlikely to get credited for you. Now, that's not just us. You'll find that's the case in just about everywhere. And it's just because of the recency of the information and all that sort of stuff, and the freshness with which things change and so on. So there will always tend to be a bit of a time gap or a time limit on getting credit. Okay. So the difference between the graduate diploma and the graduate certificate. The graduate certificate is made up of the 1st year units plus a multi unit plus 2nd year research methods. The graduate diploma is the 2nd and 3rd year units. And yeah, there's different entry standards for the first degrees, for both of those degrees, sorry. Okay, so somebody's asked about getting a Bachelor of Physio outside of Australia and starting a career as a psychologist. First thing you would need to do is make sure that your overseas qualifications are recognised in Australia. Okay, there's a central process to do that. Let's assume that they are. Yeah, what you would do is you would initially enrol in the graduate certificate. Once you'd finished that, you would then transition into the graduate diploma. There are 10 core psych units. They're not double degrees. Now, this is one of those technicalities. They're double majors. So the bachelor's double degrees are 3 years full-time, okay? 3 years full-time. Double degrees are longer, but these are not. These are double majors. Can you move between full and part-time? Yes, you can. So there's real flexibility between being full-time and part-time. You can start full-time, go to part-time, start part-time, go to full-time. You can really move between the two. So to enter one of the postgraduate courses, such as the Master of Psychology, the Clinical Masters, something like that, what you need is to have completed your 4-year degree, your honours level or equivalent degree. You need to have got pretty good marks, and you will need to undergo the entry process to get into that degree, which consists of an interview. 3 things really taken into account for entry into the postgraduate courses. 1 is your academic performance, particularly your academic performance in your honours year. 2nd is an interview. And 3rd is any relevant work or life experience that you may bring to the course. Those 3 things are all considered. So it's a very overall holistic selection process because we are selecting people to be trained as psychologists. So there's those 3 elements are taken into account. It's quite competitive, but the academic part of it is just one arm. Getting, for example, a top honours grade doesn't guarantee you will get in if you don't interview well and other things as well. And not getting a top honours grade doesn't mean you won't get in, because there's more to it than just academic entry. Honours entry is purely academic. Post-honours entry into professional training programs is more holistic and takes into account more components for entry. I don't think ACAP will never offer a Masters of Forensic Psych, but what we might offer going into the future are bridging programs in specialist areas that will allow people to move from general registration into specialist registration. So if you do the Psychology and Counselling Bachelor's degree, you will actually be a qualified counsellor, but you won't be a psychologist. To become a psychologist, you will need to do the extra education and training on top of that double major with counselling to become a psychologist. Good question. Is there a difference between psychology and psychological science? Not really. The reason why we use those terms is we want to emphasise that the undergraduate degrees are science degrees, that they're not degrees in practice. Okay, so we just use the term psychological science to emphasise that. Interesting question about combining psychology and counselling at the postgraduate level. In fact, there is a specialist branch of psychology called counselling psychology, which can be done as a specialist, what we call area of practice endorsement. So that's a professional qualification in what's called counselling psychology. Okay. So good question about whether when you finish the Bachelor of Psychological Science and Counselling, are you recognised as a counsellor internationally? Again, you would need to look at the overseas countries and ask those countries about that, because every country has different recognition standards and processes. Okay, so we're going to have to wrap it up there. It's 7:59. So I'm just going to close that chat box and stop the share. So this session has been recorded, and that recording will be made available to people in a number of different forums, and Nick will be able to give you information about that. But thank you all very much for attending this evening's session. If you do have any questions, and if you would like to maybe ask me a question specifically, I'm just going to put my email address in the chat box there for you. It's a pretty easy one. It's just john.rees@acap.edu.au. And you are most welcome to, sorry, I'll just put that to everybody. You're most welcome to email me, but remember, I'm an academic, so I can answer questions about the academic side of things for you, but I can't answer the administrative questions about things. If I can't answer that, I'll direct you to somebody who can. But if you've got any questions about the academic side of things, about what the courses consist of and what you study and all the academic stuff that I've talked about today, I'm very, very happy to answer those questions for you. So all you've got to do is drop me an email. And like I said, if it's a question I can't answer, I will very happily pass it on to somebody who can. So look, thank you all very much for attending this evening. I hope you found it useful. We do offer other sessions during the term that you may be interested in as well. They're a little bit different. So keep your eye out for those. I wish you all the best. I hope everybody's coping as well as they can. If you are in lockdown, I hope you're doing okay and managing to get by with that and looking after yourselves, looking after your physical and mental health as best you possibly can. So all the best, everybody. Have a very good evening. And please, if you do have any questions, higher education is all about asking questions. Just feel free to ask and to let us know. We'll do what we can to let you know everything you want. Okay? So I will stop the recording now. And